welcome to another episode of The Old, the New, and the Awesome. Of course, we're going to be talking about the month that was, and I am very excited to discuss all of the craziness that actually happened in March, because I will say it has been a very crazy couple of weeks, but in a very, very good way as far as I'm concerned. And as always, I've got my two colleagues working with me today. I've got Stacy and Kami. Ladies, pleasure to have you both here as always.
Hi again.
Pleasure to be back.
Of course, and as well as every single one of you that are watching, I'm glad that you are all here too. So of course, if you enjoy this video, do not forget to leave a like as well as a comment, especially if you are watching during the premiere. We would love to chat with you in real time. But of course, if you want to see all the other stuff that happens over here on this channel, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you are up to date with all of our latest content. I am sorry that I did not say that in the last video because we had a little technical difficulty when it came to February 2021, but we're not going to get into that because honestly, we went an entire month pretending that it never happened, but now it's out in the universe. But anyway, I decided to go with an interesting route, and I think this is what we're going to do moving forward when it comes to this show. I think what we're going to do is we're going to always start on a controversial topic that we can all just discuss together and vent on, and then we'll just move on to the fun stuff. And I gotta say, this is a topic that is still very much being talked about, and it pretty much got to be the end-all be-all of the political conversation these days. And it all started with the beginning of the month in regards to what happened with the Dr. Seuss company. And it all actually did start when we were talking about that special day where we want to encourage all the kids in the nation, and of course around the world, to read. And our wonderful leader, I hope you all got the sarcasm there, decided not to include Dr. Seuss in that grouping, especially considering the fact that this was done on Dr. Seuss's birthday. No sooner than that actually happened did the Dr. Seuss company decide that 6 of their classic children's books were deemed insensitive and were going to be ceasing publication immediately. Now, there's definitely been a lot of varying opinions in regards to these books. Some people don't seem to care because some of these books were books that nobody even knew about. Some people are very upset because they classify it as modern-day book burning. But some people basically are saying that because it was the company's decision to stop the publication, they're not necessarily saying that you cannot read this book if you get your hands on it. I mean, thank God institutions like the New York Public Library has stated these books are still here for people to borrow, but we will keep them on the shelf until they're just so torn and far gone we can't salvage them anymore, then we'll take them off the shelves. But considering what people have been saying, considering how many people have made a ton of money on eBay, I mean, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on these books, and then I will give you guys my thoughts. Stacy, I'd like you to start.
I am always 100% against the idea of censorship in any form. And I know this wasn't necessarily like censored, you know, like in that sense, but I don't know, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And to me, it's like a slippery, you know, slope of going down, let's pick things apart and get rid of this and get rid of that. And I'm not a fan of that ever. And Kami, I just noticed your shirt. So I don't know if that's like some kind of protest, but I love it.
Oh no, I'm sure she totally planned this. She totally did.
Yeah.
Yeah, shirts are always going to be my statement. It's sometimes it's a silent statement that speaks volumes.
Yeah, it does. And that's why we love you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like, it's so crazy because no sooner than did that happen, then we got the whole thing with removing the genders from the potato heads to a certain degree. I will admit I'm glad that Hasbro kind of sort of walked that back. Like, we're just calling the brand Potato Head, but we will give you Mr. Potato Head and Mrs. Potato Head's kits for your kids so they can still get those classic characters. And then that whole thing about censoring Looney Tunes by taking Pepe Le Pew out of the new Space Jam movie, which is really upsetting a lot of people, because I think what's very interesting is there were some activist groups that have been trying to get rid of the character Speedy Gonzales for years, long before this all happened. But it was actually the Mexican American / the Latin American community that actually said, no, do not get rid of this character. This is our hero. This is a cool character. This is our representation. They wanted him. They kept him. Then today or yesterday, now there's something going on with Monopoly. Like, it's just getting way out of hand. I think they're basically saying that the community chest cards are classified as culturally insensitive. Let me just put it this way, and I said this to Kami before you showed up, Stacy. When Bill Maher, one of the liberal kings of the entertainment world, basically gets on his own show and says this is fucking ridiculous. Those are his exact words almost all the time, by the way. That says a lot, because the question really is, what are these people going to go after when they've officially shut down everybody that disagrees with them? Well, apparently we now know, based on what happened a couple of days ago, one of the chief editors of Vogue, a woman of color, Teen Vogue as a matter of fact, was forced to resign because they uncovered some tweets that were anti-Asian that she put in her Twitter feed a couple of years ago. So it's getting to the point where the journalists now are yelling about the fact that this is wrong, and I'm laughing along with so many other people saying, you really think this is wrong? You are such hypocrites. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
There are no standards.
Twitter's a very dangerous place, though. Twitter is the one that everyone always goes back to, and they will dig and dig and dig. That comedian that it happened to, Kevin Hart, there you go. And they dug back like 10 years, and it's like, okay, so he's a comedian. We all know comedians in and of themselves are controversial. They say things that are not politically correct. That's what makes it funny. I put something on my social media about a week ago, maybe a couple weeks ago now, and I'm sure you guys have seen the meme. It's President Trump on the top saying, you know, we successfully combated, you know, whatever country, and then you have Biden on the bottom saying we've successfully annihilated Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss. And people lost their shit about that because they were like, that's, you know, this, that, or the other. And it's like, it's a joke, people. It's funny. At what point in society did we lose our sense of humor? And apparently now it's frowned upon to be crass or to be, you know, not politically correct in any form or fashion. And, you know, again, I go back to this, and I've been saying this for years. As long as it's not harmful or hurtful or hateful intentionally at one given person or one type of people or what have you, we can laugh about things that are not politically correct. It's funny, you know. Biden is not mentally altogether there, and so to say he's attacked Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head is comical. But, you know, that's the society that we live in, and it's not going to stop. People keep asking this question, you know, when is this going to end? And it's very clear that last year was the match and the fuse that was lit, and this is going to continue to happen as long as people continue to allow this. It is straight cancel culture. It is very much a censorship, regardless of how people want to look at this. Now, my take on the Dr. Seuss is this. At first, I was really upset. Like, I put a post out on my Instagram, and, you know, I think more than anything, I was hurt how could we do this to a man that we all grew, well, and I'm not going to speak for the world, but the majority of us as children grew up loving Dr. Seuss, his books, his words, his rhymes. He's a very positive person, at least for most of us. When we think Dr. Seuss, we think of the whimsical and the magical and the colorful. And how can we do this on his birthday of all times?
Right.
Now, of course, you get heated and you get caught up in the moment. And so when I put my post out, I labeled it cancel culture. I'm like, here we go again. And now we're canceling the beloved Dr. Seuss. I watched a YouTube video of a pretty well-known booktuber. I'll sans her name and her channel and all of that, but she is a librarian. And so I gave her video a go because I really wanted to hear a librarian's take on this. I also want to preface that she is in the generation that is younger than us, kind of the generation that is, you know, about 10 years younger, that is causing a lot of this uproar and bringing a lot of these things to light. And she's also a woman of color. So I want to put all of that out there because I think that's important to say.
I think I know exactly who it is too.
I wanted to hear what her take was on it because I've always enjoyed her videos. I've been watching her for years. And I really liked how she laid it out. You know, she was very logical and level-headed about it. And she said, look, this isn't a prodigy of cancel culture. What this is the Dr. Seuss Foundation has made an executive decision to remove some titles that most deem hurtful. There is some rhetoric, there is some pictures that are deemed distasteful to today's standards. They're insensitive and in some cases considered racist. And so it's not that people are saying you can't own these books. They're not saying you can't read these books. These books aren't being burned. This wasn't a political movement. This wasn't a, you know, let's pull them off the shelves and burn them inside the store movement. This was an executive business decision. This wasn't even Random House saying, we're going to pull this. This was the Dr. Seuss Foundation saying, hey, you know, we have been talking about some of these titles for years. You know, offline, Steve and I had talked about one particular title, and that is And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street. And this book has actually been changed a couple of times in reference to the specific picture that the book was pulled for. I happen to own a very vintage copy of this book, so I have the controversial picture. The character in this book is, in fact, yellow. Okay, so me as a child, and I think we can all say this here in the room, we all grew up white passing, whether our cultural backgrounds differ or what have you. When people look at us, they assume automatically that we're white and we're privileged. So for me to pick up this book and read it, I'm not going to see a problem with it. I'm not going to look at, you know, as a child, a picture of cartoon characters that in essence, 99% of these characters are made up anyways. They're not people, they're creatures. And I'm going to assume it for face value. But as an adult, if I'm reading this book, and you should grow up, you should look at things from a different lens, and I'm seeing that picture, I am going to see some pain behind that, because you don't want a child who is of an Asian culture or an Asian race to look at that and feel that they're not equal, that there's something wrong with them, that their skin is yellow, you know, because that was a derogatory term that we used 50, 60 years ago. And so if we're going to have, you know, a Black Lives Matter movement, and we're going to say that Black Lives Matter, well, and this was the argument from the beginning, well, all lives matter. Well, that's kind of where we're at now. We're seeing this influx of Asian hate crimes, and we're saying, okay, well, if Black Lives Matter, guess what? Yeah, Asian lives matter too. So now it's kind of come full circle, and those words are biting some people in the derriere, because this is exactly what we were saying from the beginning. All lives matter, and there are a lot of things that we need to focus on. There are a lot of things that we need to fix and clarify and change in our society, because if Black lives matter, then all lives matter. And if these things are hurtful and hateful in, you know, certain scenes, scenarios, rhetoric, terminology, you know, all of these things, then we need to look at all races and all cultures and say, hey, there's some hateful and hurtful things that are out there for other races and cultures as well. So I decision. That's the executive decision they made. They just said, you know, these are titles we've been talking about for years. Let's just stop talking and pull the plug. We are in a very, you know, energetic form in our society right now where 2020 stirred the pot and we're moving forward with changing. Does it bother me to a degree? Sure it does, because like I said, it happened on his birthday and I didn't understand it at first, but when I stopped and I listened, which is what we should do as people, as human beings, is stop and listen to the other side, then it made sense. Okay, it doesn't hurt me personally to read these books, but nobody's saying I can't own them. Obviously, I do own a couple of these titles, but a lot of these titles are also very old. You know, even looking at the 6 titles that were removed from being out of print, that doesn't mean you can't get them. If they're just going to be really hard to find now and really expensive. I mean, a copy of the scrambled egg super was going off for $900 on eBay, and that was just one of many lots that I saw. We maybe need to reword this, and we need to be able to look at it from another perspective. We need to look at it through another lens. And if you choose to own them, if you choose to enjoy them, if you choose to share them with your children, that's your right to do so. But we also have to respect that some people choose not to, and we need to understand why.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think the part that just got me very upset was the fact that all of a sudden some of these online retailers were just not even allowing the selling of the books. That was, I think, the part that upset me the most. But the thing that really got me angry when I first heard about this was because, you know, a lot of people were saying, you know, these are not some of Dr. Seuss's most well-known. Well, to me, On Beyond Zebra was my favorite Dr. Seuss book. I never owning a copy though, but my mom would always borrow it from the library. I had a friend of mine in my neighborhood that owned a copy, so whenever I was at his house, I would read it. And I distinctly remember when I was like 4 or 5, just sitting in my basement with a pencil and paper or magic markers or crayons and trying to recreate those funky letters that were in that book. I loved that book. I did manage to find a way to get these books outside of the Cat's Quizzler, which I never even heard of. That was the one Dr. Seuss book besides McGilligan's Pool that I did not know about. I always knew about On Beyond Zebra, and to think I saw it on Mulberry Street, If I Ran the Zoo, as well as Scrambled Egg Super. I knew about all 5 of those books. What also really upset me was I had already told my wife that when, God willing, the day would come when we would have a kid, we were going to buy some Dr. Seuss books, and I was planning to buy a copy of On Beyond Zebra. And I tried to get a copy when I heard that they were pulling it, and Barnes & Noble refunded me. I almost got it, so they refunded me and they gave me a gift card. That's okay. But I managed to find all of these Dr. Seuss books narrated on YouTube, so I downloaded them all. Now, not only are these books narrated by this one specific creator, but you actually see the full pages with all the words so you can read it yourself, and you see everything cover to cover, including like the copyright and the published date and everything, which I love. So this gave me the opportunity to really look through 5 of the 6 books to see what the issues were. And I will not lie, I understood, except for On Beyond Zebra. That is the one book that does not make sense as to why it is pulled. My wife, who is a teacher, she looked at that specific book with me. Even she couldn't figure it out. The YouTuber that Kami has mentioned, I am quite certain, I know this is the same person I'm thinking about. I wrote a comment regarding On Beyond Zebra, to which she responded and said, I agree with you. I don't understand it either. She's like, it seems far-fetched. I agree. I can see where someone would try and point it out, but we both agreed, meaning the YouTuber as well as my wife, people, I think with this one specific book, they dug a little too deep. Because I never read If I Ran the Zoo when I was a kid, but I saw the controversial images. I understand. I do.
If Amazon and Barnes & Noble are selling Hitler's Mein Kampf,
yeah,
that's acceptable. You're a Jew, right, Steve? Do you find that offensive?
Last time I checked, yes. But am I
Why are
upset?
they allowed to sell that? Why is that acceptable and this other stuff isn't? That's my problem. My problem has always been hypocrisy and standards. If you're going to set the standards, then keep the standards the same across the board, but they don't do that, and that really bugs me.
I mean, my attitude is 100% on par with yours, Stacy. My attitude is all books that are published should never be taken off the shelves, regardless of if they're controversial or if they're harmful or not. And the reason why is because you can learn something from everything, even if it's something that makes you feel uncomfortable.
Right. But who gets to set the standards? It's always changing, right?
It is, unfortunately. Will I ever pick up the book Mein Kampf? Probably not. But do I think that it's a book that should be out there so people can learn about the evil that this specific person in our history did? Yes, we should know about him, because I think that's one of the problems that I have right now with this cancel culture. These specific people, and I also want to state that this is definitely the minority. The problem is they scream too loud. That's their problem. And my issue with them is they're going to keep doing these types of actions to the point where they're going to basically give us a world where future generations are going to grow up believing that all was right. Everyone throughout time sat around the fire and sang Kumbaya and was hand in hand. And no one is ever going to realize that at one point in time, we were not a good group of people on this planet. We were a very misunderstanding, naive species of creature. And I feel that if we remove that from our history, if we remove things like old movies that we made because we didn't understand, or we had certain attitudes towards certain people because we just weren't exposed, and all we had was our own thoughts and our own perceptions, if we remove that from our own history as a species, we are doomed. That's all that I'm going to say.
I do want to add a point to that, though, because although I agree completely with what Stacy's saying in terms of double standards, and that's what we really need to look at. And also, if we start here, the where is it going to stop? Like, there is no point, because we're going to continually do a checks and balance, and then what we changed is not going to be enough. And so before you know it, it's like, okay, what's going to be left? However, when comparing Mein Kampf to Dr. Seuss, understand that Mein Kampf is not intended for children. It's intended for adults. And so therefore, adults, one would assume, have the ability to make a sound decision, whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent. We are able to understand the evil behind the words, why the book was written, and the history of Nazi Germany. Versus Dr. Seuss, which is written for children. Children do not have the ability to determine that right, wrong, or indifferent until it's taught to them. So as these books are being read to them by their parents are then put in a position to have to explain things that they might not be comfortable or willing to explain to their children. And that's kind of what that booktuber was saying. There's things that I enjoyed immensely as a child, and I'm prefacing her words that she enjoyed, that I enjoyed as a child, that I'm not necessarily going to share with my child. That doesn't mean it wasn't enjoyable for me. It just means that it was of my time and of my generation. It made sense to me, but there are either lack of representation, lack of diversity, or lack of, just a genuine desire to share that with her child. That's her right. So, yeah. But again, I'm going full circle here. So I'm going back to what you were saying in terms of it should be then left up to the parent. That's why I don't believe in censorship when it comes to books. I don't believe in pulling books off shelves. I don't believe in these banned book lists. But if we look historically at banned book lists, everything comes back full circle. Things might continually stay on, say, an educational banned book list, but that doesn't mean that the books are unattainable. That doesn't mean an out-of-print book can't be found or bought. It just means that they're more expensive, they're harder to find. It should be up to you as to what you choose to read and what you choose to put in your household. But, after, again, revisiting these Dr. Seuss titles, I understand why they were pulled, and I just think comparing oranges to apples, like in the case of those two books, that's like a huge, vast difference. Is the concept or the understanding of where you're coming from understood? Absolutely. But I just think when it comes to adult literature and children's literature, we do need to view it from a different lens and also a different point of compassion. That's just my take.
But there's no age restriction on buying Mein Kampf. So my kid can go in Barnes and Noble and pick it up. There isn't an age restriction.
Yeah,
So
but
again,
Stacy,
if that's going to be the standard, then make an age restriction for Dr. Seuss and Hitler's books.
yeah,
I
but
don't care what the standard is. I just want some like make it the same.
You see, Stacy, I get where you're coming from, but a child is not gonna go look for Mein Kampf and pull it off the bookshelves. It's common sense. They're gonna go for the books with the pretty pictures. That's what kids do. I never walked into a bookstore and looked for Mein Kampf or any
Then you
adult
have
book.
mentally ill people who will read it and decide, they need to go shoot up, people or whatever. Like,
No, again, I see where you're coming from. I really do.
Let me interject on that one too, because Mein Kampf was brought up during the Columbine shootings because the shooters had a copy of that in their possession. Mein Kampf did not make them shoot all of their classmates. They shot their classmates because they were deranged assholes who had a God-fearing complex. So when people use crutches in our society to say, oh, well, this person did this because A, they played violent video games, or B, because they had a copy of XYZ on their shelf, I call bullshit. You do evil things, you think evil thoughts because you are an evil person. Does literature add to your repertoire of information? Absolutely. But if Mein Kampf was that dangerous, then we would have pulled it off the shelves in 1999.
She's not wrong.
No, I agree with you fully.
Of their classmates, and that kind of stuff just chaps my hide, because physical material possessions do not make people do evil things.
Yeah, so that's my point. I agree with you absolutely fully. I don't blame, video games, cartoons, Pepe Le Pew for rape culture, and I don't blame a Dr. Seuss book for racism either. Reading that book isn't going to make me a racist. I can't blame the book on it.
Yeah,
it's the same across the board for me. So yeah, I'm not going to read Hitler's books and become, like Hitler. I'm not going to read Dr. Seuss books and become racist. I'm not going to play a video game and want to go shoot up people. People are responsible for their own behavior.
Absolutely.
So we're on the same page.
But again, I go back to the intent when you're reading a Dr. Seuss book. I think what a lot of people are missing the mark on is children are being subjected to this material. And so as someone who isn't represented negatively in any of these books won't affect me the way that it may affect someone of a certain culture. And that's really what the point of this whole thing is that it is so easy for us to
want to rape people, because children are watching Looney Tunes. It's geared towards children. Like, I didn't want to grow up and shoot people because of Elmer Fudd. And, kids don't want to grow up to rape people because of Pepe Le Pew.
Elmer Fudd was canceled like 5 years ago. The cartoons have been a sore target for a long time. But again, that kind of goes in conjunction with this movement here, is that no, it's not okay to just remove everything, but there are reasons that we are now questioning things that happened 50 years ago. Let's be frank, the Looney Tunes didn't happen yesterday. They weren't even in our generation. They were our parents' generation cartoons. So things that were deemed acceptable in the 1950s and 60s on a cartoon show are not deemed acceptable today. Now, does that mean that there aren't cartoons that aren't acceptable even in today's standards that are being made? Absolutely not. But again, it goes back to parenting and the rules and regulations in your house. If you deem something acceptable for your children, Pepe Le Pew, Speedy Gonzales, whatever the case may be, then let your children watch it.
Yeah,
if you don't, then don't let them. And I get that we're just kind of we're heated about the same thing but different things. But I'm just saying, I understand why some people aren't comfortable with these things. I understand it from a compassionate standpoint, but I think that sometimes we forget that things that don't affect us affect other people. It just needs to be left up to the household, the parent, the individual. Not necessarily a child, but there is also that gray line when a child starts to take on books and literature for their own, and they're reading stories to themselves, and they're choosing to pick a book. What do you want your child to have accessibility to? And some parents are saying, I don't want this representation to be learned to them. Is it wrong to censor them from that? That's up to the parent. It's not up for us to say.
No, I think
I don't know. This could go on and on and on. I get it. I understand it now. My take is definitely different on it. But I think that one of the things, even in that video that we missed the mark, this is part of cancel culture, because by choosing to remove something, regardless whether you're on one side or the other, you're saying that it's deemed inappropriate across the board. Now, but again, going back to that video, it's not that these books aren't accessible or readily available. It's just they're going to be harder to find now. So it's an ongoing battle. It's an ongoing debate, and it's quite frankly just very frustrating to wake up in this country every day because you're constantly having to defend something or explain yourself. And it's like, just let people be and let people love what they love or hate what they hate, and stop interfering with what people want to do. It drives me bonkers.
My problem in this whole thing, especially when it comes to things that are for children, this is because of the fact that I think there's a generation of adults out here in this world right now that think that kids are dumb. And they think that kids don't know how to think for themselves and determine what is real and what is not real. I mean, let's not forget the fact that when Looney Tunes cartoons were first introduced to this world, they were not originally for kids. These were shown in movie theaters that adults were watching. Eventually, people realized that kids are not going to be this stupid. Now, granted, unfortunately, there are some kids in this world that are that stupid, which is why there were a whole bunch of people that said that Superman is inappropriate for kids because kids were trying to jump off buildings, like George Reeves on the television show. And it's just like, we have to give people the benefit of the doubt. We need to understand that not everybody is what you think they are, and the problem is you are basically encasing yourself in your own bubbles, your own echo chambers, that you have no idea what anybody else is thinking. And because of the fact that you think that everybody else is thinking very badly, you think that everybody is wrong and everybody is tainted, and that everything that these people are exposed to is bad, and you need to take it away from everybody to create a perfect world. Well, unfortunately, you're not going to create a perfect world, because what you're really doing is you're removing the independence of thought. That's what you're really doing. These books, granted, if they're never sold again, as far as new copies being published, fine. It's the decision for the corporation. But give them the opportunity to still get their hands on those books that are already out there in the world. Let them read the books. Let them understand the books. And I just feel that that's what we need to do. We just need to remember that there's so much history that we cannot erase. We need to know what it was, because if you eliminate the history, you're doomed to repeat it. And that's one of the few things that some people in this world are just not understanding anymore.
If we really want to teach our children about Dr. Seuss and his illustrations, there's a whole book that's made about the illustrations that he did for wartime military photos that we can share with our children. But when we're picking up books that are directly intended for a juvenile mind, I don't think that that's really the spot for a historical lesson. If there's a harmful image that you would have to stop the story to explain something to a child, And again, the argument can be said, well, does a child really understand racism unless it's projected to them and it's fed to them? No, probably not. But at some point, they will experience that in the real world. It happens, and it's happening at younger and younger ages because children are now subjected to technology at a way younger age than all of us here present were. They have cell phones at 5 and 6 and 7 now, and they have constant accessibility to the internet. This is something that we're not privy to. I think that our generation sometimes kind of gets a little bit stuck in the way things were versus the way things are. I'm not saying not to make them available. I'm not saying that it's not okay to read them, but it should be left up to the parent, and not all parents want that availability to use a book that's supposed to be easy to read and just a whimsical book to jump into and jump out of for a bedtime story, to use it as a historical platform. Dr. Seuss should be fun. And when I think of Dr. Seuss, I can tell you right now, other than 2 books on that hit list of 6, I didn't even know of those other books until they were brought to my attention. So I think that it's perfectly acceptable to say there is a vast array of Dr. Seuss titles that kids can still read and enjoy with their parents, that parents can still share with their children, that aren't these books that are harmful to some other children. I think that the compassion and the empathy needs to be put into that place. And we need to understand that if a parent chooses to give the history lesson and go on and on with a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old about what's going on in these books, then that's their decision. Leave it up to the parent and be done with it.
Yeah, parents need to parent. That's what needs to really be done. And that's something that's also been unfortunately lacking. But that's why.
I love that. My only problem is like eBay canceling orders or Amazon refusing to sell it. That's it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I said that earlier. I totally agree. I believe that all the copies of these books that are now still out there in the marketplace, whether they're new or whether they are secondhand, they should still be sold. And they should not be restricted to how or where they're being sold. Because
and if a parent doesn't want to have their kid have it, then don't buy it.
Exactly.
But the fact that they're, rejecting orders, canceling orders, like that does not sit right with me. Because then who's to say in the future what else they'll decide to, cancel, and who's making up the rules? It depends on who's angry and what they're angry about. And there's no set standard, and the lines are always changing.
Okay,
so that's my only problem.
Okay, this was fantastic, by the way. I am now going to be very excited to see what controversial topic we're going to talk about next month. But speaking of the concepts of being canceled, let's talk about something ever so slightly that has, to many a movie fan, has technically been canceled because of a more complete version of said piece of media that just hit HBO Max this past weekend. Kami is going to take this one, but we're not going to get too far into it because we're going to be dedicating an entire episode of That's Comical to this movie. And that, of course, is Zack Snyder's Justice League. I will just say I've already watched that movie 2 times, and I am so happy that it's out and in the world right now.
I will go down and say that is probably one of the best films I have ever seen. It was so cinematically beautiful from top to bottom. The CGI was perfection. The villains were perfection. The story just carried on so well. I don't think there was any potholes in it whatsoever. I think sometimes you walk away from a film, that's 2.5 to 3.5 hours long, and you're like, oh, but this storyline was kind of left open-ended. It ended beautifully, to a point where if that's all we get, that's okay. If we get more, though, which I think we can all say we want more, there's a couple storylines that can continue on, and there was kind of a couple areas where they left it available to add on to it. I think we would all be very happy, but I mean, it even got me loving characters that I had never paid attention to, like the Flash. I mean, just his entire storyline was just so poetic in this. When he's, I don't want to give away spoilers or anything, and I know that we're going to be talking about it, but I mean, just given the introduction for me, you know, it's someone that's kind of still new to learning about certain areas of all these different universes, I was just blown away by how it all just meshed so beautifully together. And my absolute favorite thing was how Batman kind of took a back seat in this and let the superheroes be superheroes. It was, Zack Snyder has it so perfect.
Yeah, I personally have been a fan of Zack Snyder ever since I saw his take on the story of 300, which is one of the coolest comic book movies ever made. And then he gave us Watchmen. Now, I love the movie, but when I saw the ultimate cut of that movie, I was like, Zack Snyder is the ultimate comic book fanboy that just knows how to make comic book films. When I heard that he was chosen to do Man of Steel, the new reincarnation of Superman, I had no hesitations. I love Man of Steel. It's a fantastic film. I think it's the best film of 2013. I went in to see Batman v Superman, so excited that Ben Affleck was going to be playing Batman, and not just did he play Batman perfectly, he played Bruce Wayne beautifully. And even though I knew there was a more complete version that was rated R, I still enjoyed the PG-13 movie. But oh man, when I bought the ultimate cut of Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, I was so enthralled by that. And even though he didn't direct the first Wonder Woman film, I thought Patty Jenkins did a fantastic job keeping it with the similar atmosphere, still using the Junkie XL Wonder Woman theme, and still giving us a great movie. But I remembered going to see Justice League, the original version that we got in the theaters, not hating it, but not calling it a perfect film. And maybe that was just because of the fact that I felt this was all we were going to get. I was a little upset with what happened with Zack Snyder. I was a little upset over the fact that his visions got way too much studio interference. But my God, I thought that the whole thing that happened with the Sonic the Hedgehog movie was something in regards to fandom speaking out. This is the ultimate cry out for the fans to give us what we all wanted to see the first time around. And the funny thing is, what we got this past weekend was not what we were probably going to get if Zack Snyder stayed on for the whole thing. We would have got a very different movie, but what I really appreciated about this movie was it just felt so much more complete. The point of Zack Snyder in regards to his films is that he does not want to be a duplicate of the MCU. He wants to make his own thing. He wants to create his own versions of these characters. What I always appreciate about Zack Snyder is you will walk into his movie and you will not necessarily have to get an origin story, because my attitude is, and I'm going to most likely say this when we talk about this movie in depth, when it comes to the Marvel movies, those movies are made mostly for beginners. DCEU films, those are made for people who know and love these characters. Like, I still remember there were people who watched Batman v Superman and said, when the hell did Lois and Superman get together? I'm like, have you not known anything about Superman and Lois for the last 80 plus years of comic history? Seriously, how stupid can you be? Everybody knows that Superman and Lois fall in love. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows who Batman is, for crying out loud. That's what I love about Zack Snyder. He gives you the scene. You know these characters already. If you don't know who they are, then go watch some old movies. Go watch the Richard Donner Superman film for all he cares. You should know who Superman is by now.
So this is the movie that came out a couple years ago, but completely finished by Snyder?
Well, I think she's confused, like thinking that the Joss Whedon one was just like redone, but this is Snyder's version of it. That the previous one that was released in 2017 was directed by Joss Whedon. So the characters are there. Yes, the storyline is there, but that was not Snyder's vision. That was Whedon's vision. This one is the one that the fans have been crying out for since Snyder took his, hiatus, and we weren't sure we were going to get this. That was the thing. We as fans have been crying out for this, asking for this cut because we knew it existed. We knew the footage was there, but we just weren't sure we were ever going to get a completely finished product.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to elaborate on is Joss Whedon was given all of the footage that Zack Snyder had already made, but he left a lot of it on the cutting room floor and even added some of his own things. Like they redid a couple of scenes, they added some jokes and stuff. Like, I am so glad that there's a certain couple of jokes that were in the theatrical cut that are just gone. Like they're nowhere to be found. So Zack Snyder took his original version that he had before he unfortunately had to step away because of what happened with his daughter, and the studio gave him full liberty. They said, complete it, make your vision, do whatever you need to do to create this finalized vision of the film that you were originally supposed to give theaters in 2017 before Joss Whedon took it over.
I don't know if I saw the other Justice League movie. I can't remember, but if I didn't, I should just avoid that one and watch this one. Is that what you guys are saying?
Yeah, forget about the old, literally cancel it. This is cancel culture done right. All movie and DC fans and Zack Snyder fans, no one counts the 2017 theatrical release of Justice League, or as they're now calling it, Justice League, which is making me laugh every single time I hear it. But what I really want to know, because I don't think we're going to have time to talk about this on That's Comical, Kami, I want to know, now that you have seen Zack Snyder's definitive version of this film, how do you feel about Joss Whedon outside of his controversy, but as someone who loves some of his past work?
Well, I think Sarah Michelle Gellar kind of nailed it. Joss Whedon is always going to be a part of my soul. He's in my heart because he gave me Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He is a genius in his own right. He is a fantastic writer. I think he's an amazing director. I just think that he got the short end of the stick when he chose to take on Justice League, because let's face it, you just can't compare to Zack Snyder. He is completely standalone, and his vision for the DECU universe is just like no other. I mean, he honestly, beyond being a fanboy, he really gets into the heart of these comic books and visually brings it to life. And that is something that every comic book lover, regardless of your age, just strives for when they go to the theater. You really want to see these pages come to life. And there's not a lot of directors that have the ability to do that. And so, not to say that Joss Whedon is a bad director, not to say that perhaps his vision wasn't exemplary, but knowing in the back of our minds that this Snyder Cut always existed, as fans, we've always felt cheated. And so no matter what Whedon brought to the table, it was never going to be good enough, because we saw Man of Steel, we saw Batman versus Superman, and we knew that there was more to what Snyder was capable of creating. And so we accepted Whedon's version of it because, frankly, we felt as fans that this is all we're going to get. We're just going to get this leftover cut room floor stuff of what Snyder left behind, and then let Whedon kind of take over. And I think even the executives on the end of the creation of the film had hoped, with Whedon's background and what he's shown and showcased in the past on other projects, that he was going to be capable of taking that cut room floor and making it something spectacular. And maybe we wouldn't be so harsh on it if we hadn't gotten the masterpiece that we just walked away from on Thursday. Yeah. But I don't dislike Whedon. Joss Whedon will always stand very high in terms of creativity and his visionary for creating something that is like no other. And perhaps that is nostalgia kicking in for me. Perhaps that is because Buffy the Vampire Slayer holds such a strong, stronghold over me as a fan, that I think was probably my first fandom, like true, like crazy fandom. But you can't compare oranges to apples. And I think that as comic book lovers, that's what we're doing. We're butchering Joss Whedon because he butchered something that we love so much after seeing the finality and the final project that Snyder gave us. So
Yeah.
I don't hate him. I still love him, but he wasn't the right fit for this. It just unfortunately just fell short.
I mean, look, I'm not going to deny the fact that he did a great job by doing things like making Firefly or even directing the first Avengers film. I think the first Avengers film is one of a kind. But the truth of the matter is that people need to understand that you can take superhero films very seriously. They don't need to be filled to the brim with stupid one-liners and jokes and stuff like that. Like, there's got to be drama. I mean, I also see that there are some executives. I mean, that's why I feel that this movie itself is a game changer for the way that movies are made now, because clearly this one movie is a perfect example of, you see what happens when the studio interferes and when the studio leaves the creator alone to give that movie the vision that it wants to be. And that's why I think that moving forward, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to the DCEU at this point in time. I mean, I am one of those stupid lemmings that is putting on his Twitter feed, you know, hashtag restore the Snyderverse and hashtag in Snyder we trust, because he has left so much on the table for this universe. And there's so much more that I know we can get, that he can make, that we will love. Especially if there are people out there like me, because I know there's so many of them that are fans of the way that he directs films. He's not for everybody, but what I appreciate about him is that he really wants to make a statement that says superhero films can be very mature, beautiful pieces of dramatic art. And the truth of the matter is, if you actually go into a comic book store for the last 30 years, and I'm just saying this as someone who's been reading a lot of stuff, past and present and soon to be, there's not much family-oriented stuff in the pages of these comic books these days. I want to make that clear.
But in Whedon's defense, also, take a look at the Marvel Universe and what's been presented to us on film. There is a lot of comical relief in those. I mean, you know,
Yes.
that's kind of what we go to watch these films for. And so I think maybe in his mind, you know, having worked on Avengers, he kind of took that same thought process into Justice League, not really having, one, taken into account the fans, and not knowing how attached we were to the 2013 film, and how much we craved after watching Batman versus Superman a continuation of that. So again, I don't fault Whedon for that. I fault the torch that he was handed, because he wasn't given that understanding that you need to respect what's already been done. And again, that's why I say you can't compare Snyder to Whedon, because nobody can do what Snyder can do except for Snyder. And having someone else finish his work was wrong right from the start. They should have just waited to see if he was willing to come back. But again, because everybody in you know, big business gets money hungry, they wanted to just get that footage out the door and say, well, let's see what we can make off of it. And that was a bad decision. They should have just let Snyder have his grievance. He should have had his time to mourn, and then say, okay, I'm ready to work again. And now we'll even see if he's willing to continue on, you know? I mean, again, can we go on? Absolutely. There's a million other stories to tell, but is he going to want to continue doing that? It's still, you know, to be foreseen. We don't know if he even wants to continue directing.
Yeah. My attitude is, he was trying to make the DC film universe everything that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was not. That's number one. And number two, as much as I would love to see him be invited back to present more films in his vision, and then I'm going to conclude on this, I want to move on after this, but my attitude is, if he says no and he chooses to walk away, I will respect him for it, just because he got shit on majorly by this studio when he was trying to make his films. Majorly. And I think that it will be a mistake and a sad day for everybody if it ends up going in that direction. That's just my own overall attitude. But at the end of the day, I will say at least we have this. And now all I'm going to say is I'm going to wait for the 5-disc Blu-ray box set with tons of special features and an extra hour of movie. That's what I'm expecting at this point in time. But anyway, speaking of movies, so I actually took advantage of HBO Max and Amazon Prime, and I watched 2 new movies that came out in 2021. I am definitely excited because I will be going back to the theaters come hell or high water on the first week of May, because Disney has officially announced the first film in the MCU Wave 4, Black Widow, and it will only be going into theaters. It will not be on Disney Plus. So I am excited to finally get back to the theaters. But I actually watched the new Tom and Jerry movie, and I will say that it is one of the worst movies that I've ever seen. Now, I will not deny the fact that when Tom and Jerry are on the screen doing what Tom and Jerry have done for a half a century, it's wonderful, it's nostalgic, but everything else about that movie is god-frickin' awful. I give Tom and Jerry the movie 1 star out of 4. I really did not enjoy that movie at all. And I was, first of all, I didn't even think that that movie was even going to work from the get-go. But like I said, you get the Tom and Jerry classic battles of cat versus mouse, and it's cute. But honestly, just go watch some reruns of the old cartoon. Seriously, that's all.
Good to know.
Yep. But like I said, I saw it for free. I'm paying for HBO, and I got HBO Max for free. So as far as I'm concerned, it was no skin off my back. But then I watched Coming to America on Amazon Prime. Now, I'm just going to say this right off the bat. I'm not a big fan of the first film. I never have been. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Eddie Murphy, okay? But I think that when you take a look at the films that he has done in his career, I think that his 2 greatest films are the original Beverly Hills Cop and Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd. Those are 2 of my all-time favorite comedic films ever. When Jen and I started dating, she had never seen Beverly Hills Cop. Now it's one of her favorite movies. But I wanted to rewatch the original before I saw the new one, and they were both available on Amazon Prime. And again, I watched Coming to America. Did I have a good time with it? I had a good time with it the first time around. It's a very cute movie, but it just never was one of those movies that I absolutely loved. I mean, I think that the best part of that movie is Arsenio Hall. I love Arsenio Hall in Coming to America. He is just hilarious. So going into the second one, I was expecting the exact same feeling. I was expecting to have a good time with it, but I wasn't expecting to truly love it and think it was one of the greatest movies of all time. It's fun. It's a very cute movie. Yes, do they have some political stuff thrown in there? Yes, they do. They definitely want to show strong, independent women and that they can be leaders and break traditions and stuff like that. But I still feel that it doesn't take away from the movie, and it's not preachy to me. Once again, Eddie Murphy, great. Arsenio Hall, great. Wesley Snipes is the new face in this movie as far as one of the big names. Leslie Jones is also in here. Tracy Morgan is in here, so they're hilarious. But one of the characters that I was really excited about in this movie was the man who plays the illegitimate son, who is called to Eddie Murphy's kingdom to be the new king. And the actor's name is Jermaine Fowler. I watched a short-lived show on CBS with Judd Hirsch called Superior Donuts. It also starred Dave Ketchner and Katie Seagal from Married with Children. Very, very cute show. And Jermaine Fowler is hilarious in that show. So knowing that he was actually going to be in a movie with Eddie Murphy, I was excited. And he was funny. Again, everything you loved about Coming to America was in Coming to America. So if you enjoyed the first one, you're going to have a good time with it. I would probably not watch it again. I definitely don't want to get it on DVD. I'm going to just give it a nice 2.5 stars out of 4. I basically fell right in the middle with it.
It's rated PG-13, right?
Yes.
And the original's rated R?
I'm not sure.
I think so.
I would never guess that was a rated R movie, if I'm being honest with you.
I still have to see it.
Oh, all right. I think you will enjoy it if you like the first one. I mean, I don't think it's better. I don't think it's better than the first one, but it's definitely a great continuation of the story. And there's going to be a lot of these things that are going to just like hit all the nostalgia feels. Like you're going to remember a whole bunch of things. I'm not going to give anything away, but like I said, you'll laugh. You'll have a good time with it.
I'm going to watch it.
All right. I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. Kami?
I was just saying I haven't watched it yet. It's on my to-watch list, but I had to look up to see if Coming to America, the first one, was rated R, and it is. I didn't realize. I thought it was always rated PG-13, but that's just because most movies that I would assume that were rated R in the 80s were PG-13 because we were in a different time and a different world then. But yeah, it is rated R.
Yep.
Yeah, never would have guessed. And also one of the things that actually I did have a little bit of time dedicated to is music. I actually did review music back in the old days here on YouTube. So I want to talk about some new albums that I picked up from some artists that I absolutely love. I bought the new album from the Foo Fighters, and I bought one of 2 new albums that we're getting this year from Weezer. I don't think that these are the best work from either of these artists. I can name at least 4 albums of the Foo Fighters, now very large and awesome discography, that are better than this. Same thing with Weezer, but the truth of the matter is this definitely has some good old-fashioned Foo Fighters vibes. This is definitely an innovative concept album because it's orchestral. That's what I like about this album. It's called OK Human, and the Foo Fighters album is called Medicine at Midnight. It's just very interesting. Apparently, last year we were supposed to get an album from Weezer called Van Weezer, which was very guitar oriented. That's coming out in the beginning of May this year, but this was going to be the second album that came out in 2020. But because of the pandemic, Rivers Cuomo, the lead singer, decided that he wanted to have this one come out first because it fit more with the time that we were in. Because he actually has a song about the pandemic in here. But it's very interesting. It's very innovative. It's a soft listen because it's mostly orchestral. There's no guitars in it, which I think is very interesting. So I would say that if you want to hear something interesting and different from Weezer, this is definitely a good album, but it's definitely not one of their best. And the third album that I want to talk about is from a band that not many people know about. They're a British band called Pale Waves. I don't have the album yet. It's coming in the mail, but I discovered Pale Waves 2 years ago, 3 years ago, with their first album called My Mind Makes Noises. I don't know what it is about them, but they remind me of The Cure. They have a very 80s new wave sound. Their look in their first album was very much like The Cure. I think the lead singer is definitely a female version of Robert Smith, which is crazy. But their newest album, really good. It's very different, but I really like the direction that the band is going in. And hopefully when it gets here, I'm pretty sure I'll be listening to it nonstop.
The last Weezer album I listened to was, I think, in 1993, 94. That was the Blue album. So I have not listened to any modern Weezer. And when it comes to music, I have a tendency to get stuck in my decade that I remember music being cool. So in terms of new music, I rarely listen to new music anymore. I just put my old records on repeat, and that is where my mind stays.
Yeah, I'm exactly the opposite. I am exactly the opposite because I'm one of those old farts that still wants to say he's with it.
If there is a band that I like that I know is coming out with a new album, I'll definitely check it out. Like I think 2 years ago, Avenged Sevenfold came out with a new album. I definitely checked that out, but I wasn't impressed with it. I was like, this is not really them. But I will gravitate to bands that I love, but I don't go seeking out new music like I did when I was young.
Yeah, you will not be hearing me ranting and raving about the new Cardi B album. I promise you that, because I have no intentions to listen to her or Taylor Swift or any of these artists that people call music these days. I think that music is so fabricated and so fake right now. So it's basically me either holding on to the nostalgia and listening to new albums from bands that I knew ever since I was young. But if I find a band that sounds like a band that I would have listened to when I was young, I will most likely pick them up. What I really appreciate is that there are some bands out there right now that are really trying to reinvigorate the 1980s new waves. So I'm listening to a lot of albums from bands that do that. Like I listened to the 1975, I listened to the Killers. I like those sounds. There's a great band that came out 2 years ago called The Night Game. They sound like a 1980s band. I think that they're great. So I'll listen to good music wherever I can find it.
I will fight you on Taylor Swift, though. That woman is talented.
Hey, I never said she wasn't talented.
Oh, well, no, oh, okay. Well, you said you looped Cardi B and Taylor Swift into the new music that you don't like. Taylor Swift is extremely talented. She has always set herself a bar above everybody else. She writes her own music. She plays her own instruments. She can set a stage like any entertainer I've ever seen. And so regardless of whether I like her new hit or not, I will always say she's in the top of the pop side of things because she's always with it.
I like the song Style. That's the only song of hers I actually like. And it doesn't sound like any of her stuff. It sounds like something that you could have heard from like Michelle Branch or Jewel or something like that, like in the 90s. That's why I think I like it so much. But anyway, Stacy, I took a look at some of the stuff that you put on our topics of discussion. You watched a lot of old movies. I want to hear about some of these.
Yeah, I'm kind of over, geez, what's happening in my picture? I'm kind of over anything from like today. Like just society today has just pissed me off so much that I'm like, screw it, I'll watch shit that's 50 years old now. So, and my daughter really likes watching the old black and white stuff too. So that's just something we've been enjoying together. But yeah, we watched The House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price, and I loved it. It was cheesy and a little creepy, but I absolutely adored it. And now I have all these Vincent Price movies in my watch list on Amazon because there's a lot on Amazon that you can watch for Prime. So I'm going to be watching a lot more of his stuff. And I watched Werewolf of London, loved it. Apparently that's the first werewolf movie, the first movie that they made showing and depicting a werewolf. And I thought that was, again, cheesy and kind of hilarious in some points because of the way people spoke to each other. I just love the language and how they talked back then. I get a big kick out of that, and I thought the story was funny. I actually preferred that movie to The Wolfman that came later, the Universal movie, The Stepford Wives. So I read the book, and to me, the book did not seem like scary in the least. And I was kind of like, I would like to be a Stepford wife. I think that would be pretty cool. And my friends who had seen the movie were like, no, you don't. It's not cool at all. It would really suck. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, the movie definitely does show it in a much scarier light than the book. The book is like totally acceptable to me, but the movie is much creepier and it goes beyond what they tell in the book. And I don't want to give anything away if anybody wants to watch it, but it definitely was creepier. And now I understand where my friends were coming from who had seen the movie. So I liked it. This was from 1975, I think. I know there's a more modern one. I haven't seen that one, but the one from the 70s I really liked. And if you like that sort of thing, I would recommend watching it. So.
I mean, I remember the trailer. I remember the trailer from the more modern one. I think Matthew Broderick's in that movie, and I know Bette Midler's in it as well. But
I think so.
It was an interesting idea, but I had no idea that it was based on an older movie and a book too. But who knows? I definitely think that the Stepford Wives is a story I definitely want to get into at some point in time, sooner or later.
It's really thought-provoking. It really is something that starts really great conversation. So I recommend it.
Cool.
And also one of the people that was in the 1975 movie, one of the main characters, was Ginger from Gilligan's Island.
Oh, wow. That's
yeah,
awesome.
I was like, oh, she looks really familiar. Who is this? And so I started looking her up. I was like, oh, okay.
So
yeah.
So this is going to be interesting. So I'm going to talk about a movie that is one of my ultimate favorites, but then I'm going to talk about a movie that actually turned out to be one of my favorites. And the first movie that I want to talk about, of course, as a fan, I want to celebrate another anniversary year. It's the 40th anniversary of Stripes this year. The Harold Ramis and Bill Murray starred, and Ivan Reitman directed. I mean, when it comes to Ivan Reitman films, he just knows how to direct them so beautifully. As a matter of fact, this year is also the 20th anniversary of another Ivan Reitman film, Evolution, which I definitely want to rewatch and talk about sometime later on this year, because that is one of the most underrated sci-fi comedies ever made. It's one of the best David Duchovny performances as far as I'm concerned. But this movie is so funny. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Caddyshack, which was actually directed by Harold Ramis. Caddyshack is just a flat-out, laugh-out-loud comedy that really just never needed to be made. Like, it's such a mess of a movie, but people love it because it's so funny.
I love Caddyshack.
Oh yeah, Caddyshack is a brilliantly funny movie. I love it so much. Stripes has a little bit more of an understanding plot, but you know, if this movie was never made, I don't think anybody would have even realized it. But because of the fact that it's here, it really is one of the funniest movies. I mean, John Candy is fantastic in this movie. John Larroquette is so funny in this movie. PJ Souls is great in this movie too. There's such a great Judge Reinhold. I keep forgetting that Judge Reinhold is in this movie too. And right after this, he went on to do Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and then 2 years later, he was in Beverly Hills Cop. He was one of the true 80s prodigies of film. But Bill
I had a
Murray,
big crush on him in the
really,
80s.
He's great. Love this movie. It's so funny. The scene on graduation day is still like one of the most iconic scenes in all of movie history. Like, I will watch that scene over and over again just because of how funny it is. But I just think that everybody should see this movie, and I think that everybody will just absolutely love it. But the movie that I never thought that I was ever going to like at all, because just in case some of you out there have been watching my show for a while, you know that once a month I was always taking a look at a great film that I had never seen, and I was watching it for the first time. And this could be a classic movie from the golden age of film, something from the more modern times, or just a fan favorite. So I finally watched the 1989 film When Harry Met Sally, starring Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. Never in a million years that I have any want or desire to watch this movie, but I had a feeling I have to watch this movie because it's just one of those movies that everyone calls like one of the greatest romantic comedies of all time. Holy cow. This movie was one of the most fun, lighthearted, charming movies I had ever seen in my entire life. I thought that it was freaking fantastic. I loved it. It was so awesome. The acting is stellar. Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. I mean, Tom Hanks doesn't hold a candle to Billy Crystal when it comes to working with Meg Ryan. I'm just going to say that right now, because I actually was forced to see Sleepless in Seattle in theaters. I wanted to see Robin Hood Men in Tights, but my mom didn't think it was appropriate for me and my brother. So she took us to Sleepless in Seattle, and I hated it. But oh my God, When Harry Met Sally is an awesome movie. It's wonderful. I love it. And I will watch that movie again. Absolutely. I give that movie 3.5 stars out of 4. It's wonderful. I love it so much.
It's good. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I just like, you know, it's funny because I realize I haven't seen that many movies that Billy Crystal stars in, besides Monsters, Inc., and City Slickers. I finally saw City Slickers a couple of years ago. That's a great movie too. But he really is funny. He's got this great dry sense of humor. And I love dry sense of humor, but I never really knew just how funny he truly was outside of him hosting the Oscars. But seeing him in this movie, now I totally understand why people adore him. And again, Meg Ryan, really funny in this movie as well. And Carrie Fisher, wow. You know, like, I haven't seen that many movies that she's been in outside of Star Wars. She's so cute in this movie. Okay. I don't know if you guys have ever seen one of these things, but I had no intentions of bringing this to the discussion today, but I want to show you guys my new favorite toy. Have you guys ever seen one of these before? This is called a strawberry color. I prefer to call it a strawberry claw. Basically, what you do with this little thing, you basically place your 2 fingers right over here on the end, and you press the green button, and a little claw opens up. While it's open, you stick it into the top of the strawberry, and once it's in the strawberry, you let go of the button, and you twist, and the whole top of the strawberry comes off.
Oh, nice.
I saw this on a very famous YouTuber's channel, Rosanna Panzino, who hosts Nerdy Nummies, one of the most iconic names in all of YouTube. She and her friend Justine from the other famous YouTube channel, iJustine, were reviewing kitchen utensils. And they bought this box of fruit utensils. Like, I'm sure that so many of you out there have seen that circular blade thing, like you take an apple and you slam it down on it and the apple slices off, like it blooms out like a blooming onion or something like that. Well, they looked at other things like a banana slicer and a pineapple tool that cores a pineapple. And then they bring out this tiny little thing, which is called the strawberry huller, but I call it the strawberry claw. And I was just like, I need to get my hands on one of these things because I love strawberries. I do. And I always slice the top of the strawberry off, and I know for a solid fact that I'm taking off more of the strawberry than I should because I just don't want to have that green leafy piece on this. This does the job for you, and it's dishwasher safe, but I just rinse it out with a little bit of water. This is one of the coolest tools I've ever used in my kitchen. It's so cheap. It's only $7. I recommend it to everybody who loves strawberries. And the good thing is, after you take it out, there's a little bit of like a hole inside that you can like fill it with chocolate. You can fill it with cream if you want. You can do really cool things with your strawberries once you've taken that piece of the strawberry out. But this is an awesome thing. I highly recommend it to anybody.
I'm gonna have to pick one up. I just planted strawberries in my garden this past weekend, so it looks like a little rocket.
Yeah, well, I think the funny thing was on the video that I saw it on, I think Rosanna Panzino called it like an alien probe tool, which it kind of did look like. It looked like something out of a sci-fi horror movie, but it's so cool. I love it. Stacy, you watched something on Netflix called Dark, and Kami, you wanted to talk a little bit more about comics of the digital variety.
Dark is a Netflix original TV show. It's 3 series and it's finished. It takes place in Germany. It has, I guess it's called subtitles, captioning, I don't know, but it's done incredibly well. So it doesn't bother you at all the way it's done. And it is very dark, but it kind of reminds me of Stranger Things if it was set in Germany without the cute, funny kids. But with a time travel element, it's kind of like a little bit horror, sci-fi-ish, and it takes place in 2 timelines. So today's time and in the 1980s. It's very heavy into the 1980s.
Oh, that's cool.
And it keeps going back and forth. Oh, I love it so much. Yeah, so I'm like, if I could go back to the 1980s, I would be a billionaire today. Knowing what I know, you know, like I'd be investing in all kinds of things and I'd be so rich. So I think it's really cool. Again, it's one of those horror situations where you don't really want it to happen to you, but my brain's like, that seems kind of cool. So I like it a lot. I'm at the end of season 1, so I have to get through the next 2 seasons, but I would binge watch this in a weekend. I'm watching it with my son, and he wants to like take it slowly or whatever, but I'm like kind of dying to get through it to find out all the things that are happening. I love it. I totally recommend it.
I need to follow up with something regarding Netflix with you, Stacy. By the way, I am now officially on the 4th and last season of The Legend of Korra, and I really, really like it. I think that I cannot decide which one of the two Nickelodeon shows is better. I think that both Avatar and The Legend of Korra are two completely separate entities that stand out on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am so surprised that it took me so long to watch these. I actually have told a YouTuber or two that I am seriously considering bringing Versus back for a very special episode, because I think that Avatar: The Last Airbender needs to go up against The Legend of Korra, and we need to decide which one is the better show.
Have you seen the comics for it? There's a whole set of comics for Avatar.
I have not. I was actually recommended that by Katie from the Introverted Reader, who Kami has done some work with, and myself on my channel. We did our Funko Pop celebration video together. She reads the comics. She loves the comics. And I actually found out that there is going to be a Avatar/Korra free comic book on Free Comic Book Day this year on August 14th. So I'm seriously thinking that it's going to be one of the free comics that I pick up.
Yeah, you should check them out.
Cool.
Have you seen the new Korra Funko Pop?
I have actually. I've seen both of the Funko Pop lines. It's really cool.
Yeah, well, I've never watched the show or anything, but I was impressed by that. It just looks so beautiful with the orange and the blue. I was like, oh, I don't know what this is, but I like it.
Yeah, the one thing about that line, I'm sorry. The one thing about that line that really upsets me is the fact that Bolin is not in the line, because I knew that if they made Bolin Pabu, his fire ferret would be on his shoulder. I love that little fire ferret. Anyway.
Funko is getting really creative with doing, I don't know if you've noticed lately, but a lot of their pops have like little miniatures with them now, or little accessories.
Yes.
And so that might be coming. Who knows?
Well,
they might be setting up for it.
I'm just glad that the Seinfeld line is officially up for pre-order. I went batshit crazy this past week when they announced the line. I ordered 5 of them, and I am hearing that there will be more. So we'll see what's coming, because if Frank Costanza is going to be one of them, I will buy him too.
I like the Frank Costanza shirt, the Funko shirt. Have you seen that?
Well, there's 2 of them apparently. One that's coming in the Target box set, and then apparently there's supposed to be another one, and that's the one that I actually want, and that's the Festivus for the Rest of Us.
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, the only one that yeah, the one that's in the box is Serenity Now and Sanity Later. I actually like that, but I don't think I want to buy that one. I want the other one.
I was surprised. They had a lot of t-shirts. I was like, wow, this is crazy. But I guess, when you wait that long for a line to come out, they're just going to give you everything.
They had the rights for Seinfeld since 2014. And believe me, as someone who's been collecting those damn things for 8 years, I'm like, it's about time. Give them to me, and give them to me now. Like, I am so excited. This may be the last big Funko splurge I ever do, but trust me, it will be worth it. All I do know is that Sword in the Stone pops are coming. I just know that they're coming. And
that's where I need to buy.
And I've already told Jen that there better be a Merlin with Archimedes, if not Archimedes on his own, because I love Archimedes.
Oh, my villain heart is happy. I have wanted a Mad Madam Mim pop since I have been collecting these things. She is my absolute favorite villain of all time. I love her.
Mine too, Tammy. I love her so much.
And she's not really even that much of like a true villain. I mean, what she really is, at least for me, because again, The Sword in the Stone is a movie that I watched many, many times as a kid. Madame Mim to me was not necessarily a quote unquote villain. Rather, she was just Merlin's rival. That's really what it was to me. She was Merlin's antagonist. She was not necessarily a true enemy of the film. As a matter of fact, I don't want to get over analytical about The Sword in the Stone today. Maybe that's another topic for another time. But I think the true villain in The Sword of the Stone is just Arthur and his lack of self-confidence.
Oh, that's a good take.
Yeah. I mean, when my wife always sees Merlin, she always calls him Dumbledore because she totally believes that J.K. Rowling ripped off Merlin to make Dumbledore. I could totally see Dumbledore singing Hockety Pockety Walkety Whack if we weren't too careful. I could totally see him saying that. Anyway,
Now,
comic
I've been
books.
reading quite a lot.
Great.
I've been reading a ton of comic books. This actually started at the beginning of the year for me, but because obviously February was where I dived into more of like the Superman universe, but it started me on a cosmicology membership, and so I was like, you know, I need to take full advantage of this membership. And so I started looking into their catalog and stuff like that, because the books I've been reading lately have kind of been duds. I tried on a fantasy book for size. It was not what I thought it would be, and it sucked because it was so long. I invested so much time. I read The Once and Future Witches by Alex Harrow. I mean, it's not horrible, but it was just like such a repetition, and I felt like the author was like forcing you to, I think sometimes maybe with fantasy books, I think authors get to a certain page count and they think you forget things, so they have to keep repeating it over and over again. So that book kind of fell a little bit flat for me, and it's unfortunate because there was a lot of history in it, and there was a lot of reference to other fantasy novels that I love a lot. And also fairy tales. So it was poetically beautiful, but it just, the characters were kind of forgettable. And then I read Dolly by Susan Hill. That one fell flat for me. I mean, I was expecting greatness because she's given me literal chills in the past, and this one wasn't anything spectacular. And then I decided to go ahead and tackle the IDW, the catalog of 2012 of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I'm about 10 books into that series right now. And I'm just like, every day a new Ninja Turtle novel, because I'm trying to kind of build a back catalog. So that way the new generation of Ninja Turtles, where the last Ronin kind of comes into play, makes complete sense. Like, I have the back history of it, I have what I grew up with in terms of animation cartoons, and then I have now the catalog of the actual comic books, because I didn't really read Ninja Turtles in comic form when I was a kid. I only watched the 80s/90s cartoon. So getting this backstory of it is really cool, because you get a lot of history of Shredder and Splinter and their rivalry, and this actually is kind of like a reincarnation, which is super cool.
Yeah, I heard about
I'm
it.
having
I
fun.
have. Yeah, I love The Last Ronin. It's only 2 issues in. Issue number 3 is coming out in May. I cannot wait. I know that you're also reading a lot more because you and I have been having conversations about what we're reading and whatnot. And one of the few things that I know that we are going to do is, just in case nobody out there knew, Kami is actually also one of the new staff members over at That's Comical. And we already know that she will be joining me and Andy when we talk about the Zack Snyder's Justice League film in full on and cover every detail, but she will definitely be joining me and Dan for one of our recaps, because Dan and I have been discussing a little bit, and what we really want to tackle is some of the new books that have been coming out in comic books all over the place outside of DC and Marvel, because horror is back, baby. Horror is now officially in full swing when it comes to independent comic book titles. And that's why I wanted to bring that up, because one of my favorite reads from this past month, which was February, as a matter of fact, the next issue of this specific title is coming out this week, tomorrow actually. So I'm really excited. And that is Image Comics' Stray Dogs. I had already told you, Kami. I think I told you, Stacy, as well. I know I told other members of the That's Comical team about this book. This is Lady and the Tramp meets Silence of the Lambs. That's what this book is. Such a amazing story. This is Disney gone wrong in all the right ways. And that's why when I read this first book, I was full on in love with this story, and I just cannot wait to read the rest of it. It's only going to be 5 issues, but I am there for every single book. And the thing that gets me really excited is each one of these issues comes with a horror movie poster variant cover. I'm going to tackle a little bit about that in another episode of That's Comical very, very soon, but as a movie collector, I had to get the variant covers as well. I don't have it with me, but for issue number 1, this is the regular cover, and the horror film variant cover is Silence of the Lambs. And
that's what I absolutely love about that series. Those covers are exquisite, and I like how they don't just focus on America horror films. They look at independent horror as well from other countries.
Wanted to tell you a little cool thing, Kami. Issue number 5, the final issue, got its release date, which means I also got to see what the variant cover was. So, they saved the best for last. It's Friday the 13th.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to get
Is it all about dogs, like in horror situations?
It's the story of a little dog named Sophie who suddenly wakes up in a house with all of these other dogs, and the dogs talk to each other. And the funny thing is, you take a look at all the dogs on this 2-page spread, you can literally pick out every single dog, and you can reference an animated movie from the 60s all the way to the 90s. Like, I showed the spread to Jen, and she's like, oh God, that dog looks like a dog from 101 Dalmatians. That dog looks like a dog from Oliver and Company. That dog looks like a dog from All Dogs Go to Heaven. So she's like pointing everything out, and she's laughing, and she's looking and whatnot. But basically, it's the story of this little dog named Sophie who wakes up in this house, and then all of a sudden her memories are starting to come back to her. Basically, it's a story of all of these dogs that are hoarded by a serial killer who kills each and every one of their owners.
Oh, so it's not the dogs being hurt.
No, the dogs are not hurt, but the dogs know that where they are is not a good place.
Okay.
But it's just something that never in a million years did I ever think I would find in a comic book. And I am very excited to pick up issue number 2 because the variant cover is the movie poster for Pet Sematary. So I am just so excited to own that copy as well. It's a good read. I also think it's a quick read, so it's definitely something that is easy to get your hands on and easy to get through. But Kami, look, I don't think when it comes to horror stories in comic books, I don't think we've seen such a massive selection of horror comic books since the 1940s. So it's such an exciting time. And, we never did get that horror miniseries off the ground. But one of the few things that I think one of the few things that I think you should be proud of me for is the fact that through these comics, I'm reading a lot of horror now, and I'm starting to really appreciate it. Like, whether it's Stray Dogs or whether it's a story like Stillwater. And even though I was not 100% on There's Something's Killing the Children, I am very excited for James Tynion's next 12-issue DC miniseries, which starts out in June, which is called The Nice House by the Lake. I will definitely read that series, but I never in a million years thought that I would read horror books. I really didn't. And I'm really, really enjoying it. But then again, it is my favorite book of all time. So yeah, horror is definitely starting to grow on me. And I didn't even have to watch a single movie to really appreciate horror for what it is. I think I'm going in a much more interesting and more creative direction by just going straight to the comics.
Do you think this is going to be at the libraries? Like, will libraries have this?
I would not be surprised if the trade paperbacks would eventually show up in libraries. I mean, I know that Stillwater, which is a comic that I'm currently reading by Chip Zdarsky, who's one of the best writers in comic books today, I know that the first 6 issues just got put into a trade. So it might be at the library now. And I do know that the story is picking back up. In May, that's when issue number 7 comes out. And once again, even though it's not entirely horror, I mean, Kami and I also read James Tynion's Department of Truth, which is wonderful. And I know that the first 5 issues of that story are now officially in a trade paperback. Also, Kami, I heard something very interesting. Issues 6 and 7 of Department of Truth will never be in trade paperback because they are not part of the story arc that is picking up again with issue number 8. So if you want to read issues 6 and 7, you should try and get your hands on the actual comics.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Stacy, you use Hoopla, don't you?
No, my library doesn't have Hoopla.
Really? Oh, well,
No, they use,
that's where I get most of my modern day digital comics.
Okay. Yeah, they use Libby, but I don't know what they have on there.
There's so much. There's so much right now out there. And that's one of the few things that we're definitely making a theme over at That's Comical. And that's the fact that if you're not interested in the traditional superhero formula, but you want to get into comic books, now's the time, because there's a lot of different artists and authors and companies that are really trying to make comics that are not necessarily just about superheroes. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do love the classic superhero formula, but right now I'm just more excited about the other stories and less about the superhero themes. I mean, I know that another comic that's coming out this summer that I know Kami would be very interested in is The Lot, but the problem is it's from a new company called Bad Idea, and they are very, very strict in regards to how they sell their books. They only sell them at select local comic book shops. You can't download them. You can't read them digitally. You have to pick up the physical book. And The Lot is the story about a old movie lot that used to film classic horror movies in the 1970s, and apparently there's something a little real about the horror movies that were filmed there. So it's 4 issues. It's coming out in July. Very excited, and I'm gonna read it. I'm excited. My comic store sells Bad Idea, so I'm picking them up.
That's a beautiful thing about digital comics, is that you do get that beautiful imagery. I mean, the color is very vivid. You know, you get very you get a wide variety of older comics as well, but you are limited to some of the newer stuff because there are certain companies that don't put their material on there. And then you know, like you had just mentioned, where some issues get skipped for whatever reason. So digital is good to a degree, but I've always said that even when it comes to digital books, that, you know, that nothing compares to a tangible printed copy. And if you can get to a bookstore, get to a bookstore and buy them. Unfortunately, I'm just very limited to comic book stores in my area, so I kind of just have to work with what I've got. But
Yeah.
I definitely use my library. I have Comixology that I'm now a member of and have been for a few months now. And I just, you know, try and utilize as many resources as I can, because things like this, where you have, you know, a new influx of horror material, it's a good time to pull people into that horror realm, because, you know, I'm always singing praises about horror, whether it be movies or books, and they're both very different entities, but I always say horror has something for everybody. And this goes to show you that if you love comics, there is potentially a horror comic out there for you. So I love that this is happening.
Well, I think that's going to wrap it all up. And this was definitely a great show today. I'm really excited for our next discussion. I will see what I can find in terms of the topic that will make us rant and rave for about 30 to 45 minutes. I'll definitely make it worth our time. But anyway, on behalf of Stacy and Kami, I want to thank every single one of you for watching another episode of The Old, the New, and the Awesome. And we are looking forward to seeing you guys for the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed the video you just watched, feel free to leave a comment. Also, feel free to subscribe if you want to be up to date with our latest videos. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next one. Actions speak louder than words.